Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. This is Helen Thomas and the CDFM study group. Today we will begin review of CDFM Module 4, Competency 4 and Competency 5 because these are short sections. And so if you're on the Facebook Live and you have particular questions, if you're doing it during the live sessions or if you view it later, you're welcome to leave comments or questions on any of the material covered in the video. If you're on the phone line, please stop me at any time if you have particular questions. Maybe you need me to explain something better for you, and I will go ahead and do so at that time. All right, so how do we get to life cycle sustainment on chapter 4.1? So remember, there are 3 DoD support systems. They are JCIS, Joint Capabilities Integration and Development System. The JCIS process is done to look at the strategy to identify any capability gaps. They look at doctrine, organization, training, what's our manning document, equipment, material. Do we need new aircrafts, new vehicles, new DTS systems? What do we need to fill that capability gap to meet the National Defense Strategy? And the National Defense Strategy meets the National Security Strategy. So once you identify that in JCIS, it'll either trigger the PPBE process or the Defense Acquisition System process. If it's a material solution, it triggers the acquisition system. If it's anything else in the .MLPF acronym, it triggers the planning, programming, budgeting, and execution system. Those 3 systems work together. They overlap to meet the National Defense Strategy. And for purposes of the CDFM Module 4, the National Defense Strategy is called the Quadrennial Defense Review. So if you go through Module 4, you're probably not going to see National Defense Strategy. You're going to see Quadrennial Defense Review, the QDR, because it's the same thing. It's just updated in the newer study guides. So once we identify a material solution, let's say the solution to fill that gap is a new aircraft, then it triggers the acquisition system. So all I'm doing now is recapping to get us to competency 4. So if it's a material solution, remember the phases and the milestones. You go to material solution analysis. Now we know what the capability gap needs to do on paper. Now we need to do an analysis to figure out what course of action do we need to take. So you have, with the program manager's input, you come up with an acquisition program baseline, you do a cost analysis, you come up with what's it going to take to maintain it, sustain it, that life cycle sustainment plan, how much it's going to cost. All of that is done by the program manager and presented to the milestone decision authority. So you have several courses of action in a material solution analysis. They, for lack of a better word, war game, analyze to see which course of action is the best decision to move forward. They give their recommendation to the milestone decision authority, and the MDA makes a decision to move forward. That decision point is milestone A. Successful milestone A would then trigger the next phase, the technology development phase. In the 2011 is technology development. In the newer study guides for the module 1, 2, and 3, it's called something else. So I'm just focusing. I gotta train my brain to come back to 2011. So technology development, we want to figure out how to reduce technology risk. So that's what's done in that process. So taking us now to page 4.4.1 in the 2011 study guide. We are now going to be looking at how we're going to sustain that aircraft. That's my example, an aircraft we're building or developing, but we need to know not just how to build that aircraft, what is it going to take to sustain it? Excuse me. So if you read in the introduction on the bottom of page 1, in the middle there, it says the program manager is responsible for providing the needed product support capability to maintain the readiness. So the bottom line, if you read through all of that, is just pretty much saying who's in charge of the specifics on that program. When in doubt, pick program manager. Who is the life cycle manager? That might be the way how the question is posed to you. The program manager is the life cycle sustainment. So they're the ones that manage it. So here it tells you, let me see, I think it's the next page. Yes. So if you flip to page 4.4.2, and I like to look at the bullets at the top. The first one says life cycle sustainment is considered during material solution analysis phase. That's the first phase. And it matures throughout technology development. A life cycle sustainment plan is prepared for milestone B. So I told you the success for this test is you're going to have to know which document is prepared in which milestone or which phase. So the planning part of the life cycle sustainment is done initially, the first phase. They're considering it while they're figuring out the courses of action, analysis of the alternatives, milestone A. However, it's not put into a plan until you get ready to go into milestone B. Because remember, a formal acquisition program does not begin in milestone A. It does not begin in material solution analysis, milestone A, or technology development. The formal acquisition program is approved in milestone B. Any question thus far? I've said a mouthful. So I'm also looking at my module 4 notes, program managers. All right. So on page 3443, you see the diagram again for that acquisition process. You got your phases: material solution analysis, technology development, engineering, manufacturing. Above them you see the triangle. That's your milestone A, B, C, your decision point, because you don't move on to a next phase until they make a decision. So milestone A, B, and C are your decision points. And even in milestone C, after that you still have to have a full rate review, decision point. Before they actually develop all the items, you have to have another decision point. So in the paragraph under that diagram, where it starts off, life cycle sustainment planning shall be considered, again, during material solution analysis. But that's the planning part of it. But the life cycle sustainment plan, if I say when is a life cycle sustainment plan required, it is required at milestone B. And you think about it this way. If milestone B is the final decision point to move into an acquisition program, that decision maker wants to have everything in place. All the information, all the planning is done. So we need to know what are we going to do for the next year or whatever, how long it takes. Also, the life cycle sustainment plan shall be a part of the program acquisition strategy. So I think that was last week. I don't know, these weeks roll in together. You got the acquisition strategy is where you start milestone B. So if you know where they are, make you a diagram as you go through the material, pencil in where everything happens. That's the best way to start off studying this, is to rewrite it. Okay, so life cycle sustainment plan is at milestone B. And milestone B is the beginning of the acquisition strategy. B and C is acquisition strategy. Any question for those on the phone line? On page, remember, cradle to grave when you're thinking about developing a product. So all of this is considered before they even develop the aircraft or develop the vehicle. They not only look at how much it's going to cost or what the requirements are to develop it, they also look at the last paragraph on page 444, demilitarizing, disposing of the item. Those instructions have to also be a part of that planning process. So they know how to get rid of the item once the life, if it's a 10-year life cycle, at the end of that 10-year, what do we do with the equipment? How do we take off the military requirements? Do we sell it to another country through foreign military sales, or do we trash it? So those are done. And guess who creates the disposal plan? The program manager. In this exam, there will be lots of instances where the program manager is the answer. So let me put it that way. On page 445, key life cycle sustainment considerations. So if you think about it, the systems they're developing, you got to look at how we're going to support the product. Interoperability. Can we take parts from one system and use it on another system? Data management. Is it secret data? Is it how we going to manage the GPS system? Who can tap into them? So all of those things on the list of the bottom of page 5 and page 6 are considered. Configuration management. Let me see, I got a little check here. Configuration management, the definition is a process for establishing and maintaining consistency. Configuration management. How do we manage to keep it on track? Whatever on paper that we say we wanted to build, configuration management is how we keep track of staying on target, on track for that particular development. So you make sure you know the definition for configuration management. The phases, let me see. So the different parts of the acquisition, key life cycle sustainment activities, is either going to be a pre-acquisition step, an acquisition step, or a post, the sustainment piece of it. So when you looked at the chart and it had the phases and the milestone, the things that you do before milestone B are pre-acquisition. So when you read through that, the scenarios, you do your analysis, you do your war gaming, you try to figure out what the best courses of action. All of those steps fall under the pre-acquisition activity. Acquisition, as we said, the formal acquisition program begins at milestone B, so it makes sense that your acquisition part of it starts at milestone B. We want to make sure that we develop an operational system. Then finally, once we develop the system on page 448, sustainment. We got to take care of it. We got to sustain it. We got to maintain it. We got to have people who do the preventive maintenance on it. If something breaks on it, is it up to the user to fix it? So those are sustainment operations and support that is considered. So the operations and support phase is the sustainment phase of that activity. Any questions? So those are the three acquisition activities: pre-acquisition, acquisition, and sustainment. Whenever you have a list, you need to know what differentiates whether I'm at the first part of the activity or the last part or the middle. Also on page 8 in the second paragraph, post-IOC product support strategy assessment. When you read through that, it says these are reviews that are conducted, again, to assess the success or failure of that equipment. These reviews occur normally every 3 to 5 years after IOC. IOC stands for Initial Operational Capability. So when we develop that initial aircraft and we put it in the field for the warfighters to use, there must be a point where we look at the results of it. Is it actually performing to what we decided we needed to do on paper when we did the J6 process? So you tie it all back to that. So every 3 to 5 years after IOC, a review is done to check after the initial operational capability. All right, so I'm trying to keep up with my notes here. All right, where are we at? Page 8 at the bottom. Review knowledge. Acquisition. So some of these terms should be familiar to you. Initial capabilities document. The ICD. So remember when the Joint Requirements Oversight Council in the beginning, that's the council that does the J6, where the chairman is the vice chairman of the Joint Chief of Staff. They're responsible for running the J6 system. When they determine there's a capability gap, they also determine what they're gonna need to fill that capability gap. That is published in an initial capabilities document. This is what we identify. Don't just bring me the problem, give me a proposed solution. So the proposed solution to fill that capability gap out of J6 is that ICD. As they learn more in the material solution analysis technology development, you have a capability development document. One input from the program manager is going to tell us what do we need to develop that capability. And then once we develop it, the capability production document. So it should all make sense to you if you learn them in order. You kind of know initially they say what on paper what we need to do, then once we start developing it, and then once we produce it. So that's what those three documents represent. These documents are the sponsor's means to specify what we need to test, the attributes, the parameters, the objectives in that particular capability, key performance measures, attributes, and performance parameters. ICD, CDD, and CPD narrative should also address the maintenance of it, the sustainment. Another term you should already be familiar with because it happens in material solution analysis phase, that's the analysis of the alternative. So you notice a lot of this information is repetitive. If you get to learn the process from the beginning, identifying the ICD and working your way through, you'll see that a lot of this information in this study guide overlaps, repeats itself. So none of these terms should be a surprise to you. Analysis of the alternative is when in the beginning when we came up with our courses of action, we got guidance from the Director of Cost Assessment and Program Evaluation, the DK, to do the analysis. These are the categories and how you're going to compare one course of action to another. So you'll know, okay, based on the criteria and the objectives identified, option number 2 is the best solution. Technology development strategy. Okay, that's what I was trying to remember. So in the beginning, that phase is also, that strategy is called technology development strategy. That's where you do your material solution analysis, your milestone 8, and technology development. Technology development strategy is done. And then the acquisition strategy begins at milestone B and beyond. Your acquisition program, that should be baseline on page 9. We're still on page 9, going through these terms that we should all be familiar with. Your baseline is, that's a baseline tells you that's your starting dollar amount criteria that the program manager developed to say if you're trying to develop this new aircraft based on the cost estimates that we've done, this is how much it's going to average cost the government to develop. Your program baseline. Acquisition strategy we already touched on, milestone B, to how we're going to go into that formal acquisition program. And later on we're going to get into test and evaluation because we're going to have to test the product. We're going to have to test that aircraft. Systems engineering, that's your detail. So all I'm doing just reviewing the data. Life cycle sustainment plan, again, repeat, happens prior to milestone B because we needed to determine if we're going to move forward into that formal acquisition. So that is a repeat of what you already know about it. All right, what are your questions so far? Feels like I'm going fast. Miss Mary on the phone line, what's your question?
I don't have any at this time.
Okay, all right, and anytime you feel free to jump in. All right, so let me check my notes. What is the system? When does the system enter the acquisition process? Milestone B. All right, performance-based logistics. On page 13, the key thing, if you hear the term performance-based logistics, the second paragraph on page 4413 says the essence of performance-based logistics is buying performance outcomes, not the individual equipment, parts, action. We're buying what can that equipment do. So your PBL means we're buying the outcome. So make sure you're familiar with that on page 13. Purchase of a support as integrated performance package, buying outcome. Let me add that to my notes. Not the individual parts. On the bottom of page 14, award contracts. The preferred performance-based logistic contracting approach is the use of long-term contracts with incentives tied to performance. Because we just said the purpose of PBL is to get our outcome, is performance outcome, so it makes sense that we want to have contracts that's tied to performance. See how that kind of works together. So what is this performance-based agreement on page 15? Performance-based agreement. So the chart, again, I like diagrams. So the chart on the bottom says in the middle, you have the program manager, PM. On the left side, he's got the industry, support provider. At the top, buys performance as a package. So remember, we're buying performance outcome. And then to the right, we have the warfighter, the force provider. So it is the job of that program manager, according to this diagram, performance-based agreement is the program manager enters into these agreement with the user and also the industry, the contractors, right? The user says, I need this type of aircraft with these specifications on it, and then the program manager takes the requirement from the user and they enter into agreement with the industry, the support provider, or the contractors to provide what the warfighter needs. So visibility into cost risk decision across the life cycle. So the program manager is a single point for connecting what the warfighter needs with what the contractor provides. All right. That's as deep as it gets with that. All right, so my note says performing buying outcomes. Decision to acquire support for performance-based logistics is based upon a best value determination. Performance-based agreements are executed between the program manager and the warfighter, and the program manager and the support provider. A life cycle sustainment plan is prepared for milestone B, and which statement is true with regard to performance-based logistics? We are buying performance outcome. So all of that's a repetitive. So that is the end of that piece of it. So now when we move to chapter 5, on competency 5, starting on page 451, now we're looking at human systems integration. We have an aircraft, but guess what? The aircraft is not going to fly itself. So we have to look at the capability, the human capability that is needed to operate that aircraft. So that is what chapter 5.1 is all about. Human systems integration. So, under the introduction, again, I think that's second to last sentence on that first paragraph, program managers to use the elements of human systems integration to design and develop systems that effectively and affordably integrate human capabilities. Because as they're building these systems, they have to look at the safety, the survivability, all of these other things, security of that human being that's going to be flying that aircraft, that's going to be driving that equipment. Human system, HSI planning, I'm reading the last sentence, summarized in the acquisition strategy and systems engineering plan. So that's another document. If you're doing your diagram, you should be adding the SEP and the acquisition strategy. So we're looking at a total systems approach, cradle to grave. How do we get rid of it at the end? How do we develop it? How do we get rid of it? So that's what we're talking about here, human systems integration. On page 452, it gives you the domains. That means the key category when it comes to HSI that's being looked at. Manpower. What type of tasks are they going to be required to do? Operations and maintenance rates, how much we're going to pay, workload. Then you go to personnel, what are the specific skills that individual is going to need to be able to fly that aircraft, for example. So part of that second one on the personnel, towards the end of that paragraph, you see the target audience description. That is a document that details the specific skills, cognitive, physical, and sensory abilities that individual needs to have to be qualified to drive that equipment. So that's the TAD, target audience description, TAD. And I think that's the only spot where I saw that word, so that's why I wanted to point it out to you. Training, they tell what type of training the individual is going to need. But on the top of page 453, when talking about training, both the sponsor and the program manager should give careful consideration and priority to the use of embedded training. We want training that's included in the operation of that equipment, right? So embedded training, that's what I'm trying to point out there. Let me see, training. All right, so I'm doing two things. All right, any questions so far? HSI and develop systems that effectively integrate human. All right, human factors, engineering, so embedded training, and then the bottom of page 453, environmental, right? Can the human survive in this equipment? Can they breathe? What type of air do they need? What type of environmental concerns do we have? So all of that is considered. So safety factors are considered when you're designing that equipment to minimize the potential for mishap. We don't want to cause any injury or death to those operators or whoever's working on that equipment. So safety, the environmental concerns are also addressed. So none of this, it should be surprising to you. So when you see these terms, it should make sense to you. If you're building an equipment, then you want to make sure that whoever you put in the equipment has the right skills, the right training, and so forth before they actually operate that equipment. On page 454 starts other considerations when the domains of human system integration. Habitability goes to the same description of that human being needs to be able to breathe. They need to have the right temperature. So we look at habitability factors in their working condition. So morale, safety is concerned, health, and the comfort of that user who's operating that equipment. On page 455, Human Factors, Engineering and Integration, It also talks about survivability and suitability. So actually, let me go, So under the introduction, it says the program manager, again, shall employ human factors to design systems that require minimal manpower. So the system should not need a whole lot of people to operate it. When they're building it, they're trying to figure out what's the minimum amount of people is going to take to operate that equipment. So that's part of when they're coming up with the engineering plan for that aircraft or that equipment. 456 is just telling you when they're looking at the guidelines for addressing the human factors engineering, the design and development applied to the process, test and evaluation. What are the testing requirements so that you can make sure that it is fit for a human to operate? So test and evaluation. So pretty much throughout the life cycle sustainment process, you have testing that's continuously done throughout the phases and the milestones. Life testing is always done. So it tells you on page 457 under integration of these human factors that the program manager should integrate the system requirements for the 8 HSI domains we went over, starting on page in chapter 5.1. And the results of these integrations should be reflected again, and they update the data as they go through. And the program manager should have a plan in how to integrate the human in place prior to entering engineering and manufacturing, right? Because you need to know, okay, what are we going to need to do? So prior to milestone B, we want to know not just the engineering for the equipment, we also want to know the human factors that's involved, integrating those human factors into the process. On page 458, let's see, HSI strategy, risk mitigation. Every decision that's made, there's a risk associated with it. And so you identify the risk while they're doing the analysis, and then they determine what mitigation could they put in place. What things could they put in place to reduce those risks to that human being that's monitoring or managing that equipment. HSI capability document, required capabilities. So all of this is repetitive, so that's why I'm kind of just brushing past it. Always read your summary in this module 4. This exam is pretty straightforward from the book, unlike the other 3. So the information is direct. So know what's there. So if you see something different, you can identify it. So on page 459 of the summary, I'm just going to go over that last paragraph. The key to a successful human systems integration strategy is how you're going to integrate that human being in with the equipment, making sure that they have the right training, the right skills, the right tasks to be able to successfully operate that equipment. So when they do the planning, that factor is, so integration is the key to success of that HSI strategy. So this integration effort involves, so while they're doing the testing and the analysis on the milestone, they have integrated product and process development and integrated product teams. They have teams that actually war game or actually do analysis in, okay, once we introduce this human being, what other type of safety considerations do we have? What type of things do we need to consider in that process? HSI plans must be summarized in the acquisition strategy. So remember, you got acquisition strategy and the SEP, Systems Engineering Plan. Both of those occur at milestone B. And the program manager have an overall HSI plan in place prior to entering milestone B. engineering and manufacturing phase. All right, so even though these were short chapters, that's a lot of information. So if you kind of view the module 4 from the J6 process to identifying a material solution, what it's going to take to fill that capability gap, now we're developing the item, just kind of walk it through. And I need the objectives, the parameters, the attributes of that equipment. Then I start to develop the equipment. What type of risks do I face? Now I want to introduce human factors into it. I need to consider the risk associated with that decision also. Because as we move on, you're going to see, then we move to information technology. Because a lot of these systems, they got GPS, they have other technology things that we have to also consider in the systems engineering plan. So that's what the next couple chapters deal with, is now dealing with the information technology introduction into that process. So you're looking at all the key areas in the developing of that one aircraft. I need to consider not just the aircraft development, the sustainment of the aircraft. I need to also consider the human factors. Then the next week, we're going to look at the IT factors. What type of security? Let's say it's secret data and I have coalition forces or allied forces working alongside. How much of that information are they allowed access to? All of those things are considered in the planning phase. All right, so I think I've said, actually, and see all that. So when you study for module 4, all of that we did in less than an hour. So repetition is what's going to gain you success and understanding what's going on. And it all begins with understanding that diagram of that life cycle of an acquisition program, and then knowing what's happening at each phase and why is it happening. And then when you look at it logically, then it's easier for you to recall the information. All right, so I'll pause at this time for any particular questions that you may have on the CDFM Module 4, Competency 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5, since we're up to 5 now. All right, I don't hear any questions, so I'm going to end here today, and then next week we're going to do Competency 6 and 7. So that's IT 6. And technology protection, and then how we're going to protect that technology is competency 7. All right, moving right along. So if no questions, no concerns, no comments, this is Helen Thomas on the CDFM study group on the Facebook. I'll upload the link to the YouTube page because I'm trying to push the traffic to our YouTube page. Just Google CDFM study group and you'll see our YouTube videos on each of these sessions. So in case you don't get it all on the phone or get it all on one, you can always go back to our YouTube page and you'll see a video capture or recording of our weekly sessions. All right, this is Helen Thomas at the CDFM study group. I thank you for stopping by, and I'll see you guys again next time.
Thank you.